Welcome to the Wild Holy podcast, where we explore the untamed edges of the sacred, the mystery of the divine, and the wonder that lives in the spaces between. I'm Faith.
And I'm Stephanie, and today we are so excited to welcome a truly luminous guest to our conversation space. Joining us is Lauren, a pastor, a guide, and a fellow seeker of the holy in the wild and wondrous corners of this world.
Lauren is a pastor of a vibrant and thriving spiritual community. She's been serving in ministry for several years, and along the way, she's found the sacred, not just in sanctuaries, but beneath canopies of trees, along forest paths, and in ancient, awe-filled, thin places like Stonehenge.
I can't wait to get into it. Lauren is also a certified forest therapy guide, inviting others to slow down, to listen deeply, and encounter the holy in the living world around them. And today we're going to be talking with Lauren about what it means to experience the wild holy, how nature has shaped her faith, and what it feels like to step into spaces where the veil is just a little thinner.
And so find a comfy place, take a breath, and settle in. This is a conversation we're so honored to share. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you.
So, Lauren, do you want to just give us a sense of your background? Where are you from? I know we're both from the Midwest, and also your spiritual lineage.
Sure. So I grew up in Wadsworth, Ohio, and I also grew up in the United Church of Christ. So I am a cradle UCCer from infancy, actually. And I could not have been in a more supportive, loving home church. Childhood brings me joy, peace, a sense of safety. I was baptized, confirmed, and ordained all out of the same church. So my roots go very deep there. I can honestly say from childhood, I never had doubts that God loved me, that God loves everyone, frankly, and that out of that love, it was my job to help love the world, and not in a I'm going to save you for heaven sort of way, but in a we can be co-creators with God and help create heaven on earth by how we treat each other, loving God and loving our neighbors, but also loving ourselves. So I had such a beautiful, supportive, stable sort of upbringing in my home church in the UCC. I went to school in the South for college, and for the first time in my life, really encountered more hostility, I would say, to my call to ordained ministry. You know, I was kind of in my happy UCC bubble in the Midwest. And I think if people perhaps came from more conservative backgrounds and didn't necessarily agree with women's ordination, they were too polite to say so. And that was not always the case with certain people in the South. And so it was really, I think, a time in my life of honing in on who I am, who God called me to be, and feeling more comfortable with people who disagreed, but not taking it personally in a way, to just recognize there's a great deal of diversity in thought and belief, and not kind of taking on other people's perceptions. But it was a hard lesson. I mean, it was really kind of rough going there my first couple of years in college, and feeling frankly a little bit unmoored, because I did have such a stable, loving, like supportive environment. But I'm really grateful for that, because it helped me, I think, get a thicker skin in a way. I'm also a principal's daughter. So I learned to have a thick skin, literally being a student in the same building as my father, and when he was the one in charge of discipline. Mm-hmm. And, I used to say to kids, if they would get in trouble and they would come to me and complain about my dad, I would say, if you just follow the rules, you'd never even really see him, so that's kind of
a good
on
principal's
you.
daughter, Lauren.
Exactly. Like, that's kind of on you, man. You need to do what you're supposed to do. So anyway, I feel like those experience helped me get kind of, I don't know, thicker skin and just kind of live into, I think, who God created me to be. And now it's to the point where, I'm entering my 15th year of ordained ministry. And it's sort of like, if people have issues, I'm like, man, take it up with God. Like, I don't have time. I just don't have time to engage with that in a way because I'm too busy doing my thing, is how I honestly feel.
I have a question that I'm curious to have you answer. When did you first feel the call toward ordained ministry?
So I was in 6th grade. I was 12. So
Wow.
I had a really significant religious experience. Christmas Eve, 1996. I had an experience leading worship. I was one of the readers at the later service, which was the more serious service because there was the family service, but then there was the 9 or 10 p.m. serious service. I was so nervous that I memorized my scripture. I wanted to do a really good job and really represent my family, do a good job for all of the adults in the church because this was the service, right? I gave my reading and sat down and I felt such deep peace, almost like light from within, and this reassurance of this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm really supposed to do this. And I went out into the parking lot that night and I told my parents, I think I'm supposed to be a minister. And they were like, okay. you know, they weren't immediately like, no, but they also were like,
Yeah.
okay.
Kids say they want to be a lot of things when they're growing up. So it's
Right.
probably like, okay. Yeah.
Exactly. There are ministers who have generations of ministers in their family that like being a minister is the family business, if you will. Whereas in my family, nobody had ever been a minister. I don't think anyone ever will be a minister besides me. So
You know what's
it was
beautiful,
like,
Lauren? You know what's beautiful about it too is and their reaction probably had nothing to do with you being a woman either because of the
no,
church that you grew up in. That wasn't a figure in it. It was just kind of
no.
like, oh, okay, yeah.
Right, right, right. Yeah, so they were very supportive. I preached my first sermon when I was 18. I was a senior in high school, and they rolled out the red carpet in a way of like, okay, if this is what you want to do, we want to give you every opportunity possible here to experience what it's like leading. So like little things, but I remember helping serve communion on Easter with my pastor because he wanted me to experience serving communion with a big full sanctuary. So just little things. They wanted me to get a good head start in a way.
They sound really supportive.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
wonderful.
That church is full of saints is what I will say.
Yes. Is there anything else when you were younger where you kind of you felt the divine speaking to you in that kind of way?
That was the clearest. But then I would spend, and this sort of gets into discovering the holy outside of the walls of the church. There was a beautiful oak tree in the side yard of our house, and I spent hours in that tree. And the funny thing is, I am very afraid of heights. So the fact that I would climb up that tree and I would usually be on the second most stable branch, but I never went too far up because that was a scary up there. But I would sit myself on a branch that felt very supported and also high up enough that I could be in the canopy of the tree. And I can't tell you how many hours I would spend in that tree. And when I think about it now, it was a very peaceful, centering place where I spent hours just kind of daydreaming, being almost like a blank slate in a calming, peaceful place. And that really stands out to me. That tree ended up getting a disease and had to be cut down. And I was so distraught over the loss of that tree because it was just, I mean, it was a beautiful tree, but it also was like it was one of my sacred places. So it really was, that tree. So that also stands out to me as like a sacred, happy place. Yeah.
Yeah, that might have been maybe your first connection with the divine through trees in particular.
Yes.
I kind of am remembering another story about a tree and your college. Am I remembering something right? Like
Yes.
yeah, tell me about that.
So I went to Elon University in North Carolina, and Elon in Hebrew means oak. And so the reason that the college had that name is the campus is just full of oak trees. Again, my sacred tree is oak trees. I just love oak trees. So I went to college, and at Elon, when you begin your studies, you're given an acorn, and it's like this whole ceremony, and you're given an acorn. And then when you graduate, you are given an oak sapling that you are encouraged to plant out into the world. So I got my oak sapling when I graduated. I went back to my parents' house and we planted it in the spot where the oak tree of my childhood was.
I didn't realize that.
Yes.
Oh, how cool.
So we planted it. My parents had someone who helped them sometimes with landscaping, and he helped really nurture that tree. He said this is a good spot for the tree. So we planted the tree there, and it now my Elon oak is enormous. It is a huge, beautiful tree. And when my parents sold their house, I wrote a letter to the people who bought their house and explained the meaning of the oak tree, and also said, please, please, please never cut it down. Like, I know it's your house, and of course you can do whatever you want, but I would like you to know the history of this tree and what it means. And I just hope that you have, as many fond memories in this home as my family did. So
I bet they loved that.
yes, my mom said that. Yeah, my mom said through the realtor, she heard that they cried.
Oh.
So it was a good letter.
It was good.
A very good letter.
And well accepted.
Yeah.
Good.
Yep.
Oh, the tree continues to bless.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, I mean, you perfectly set us up for conversations about thin places, conversations about like leading others through experiences in nature. Can you tell us what a thin place is for those who haven't heard, or what it means to you? You don't have to give us the dictionary definition, but your understanding of the heritage of that.
So, a thin place, the term comes from Celtic spirituality. And it was this idea that ancient Celtic peoples had, that there were certain places on earth where the distance between heaven and earth were thinner. And so they would call them thin places. And even some writings, it's very specific that it's 3 feet, that it's 3 feet between heaven and earth. I mean, it was that specific, that this idea that it's a place where you feel like the veil is lifted between heaven and earth, between yourself and the divine. Just that it's thin is always the term that often gets used. And I have sometimes thought of it as an actual physical place you could point to on a map, a geographical place, but sometimes you can think of thin places as a place in time. So my call story happened in the sanctuary of Trinity United Church of Christ, right, in Wadsworth, Ohio. Could you say the sanctuary itself is a thin place? Sure. But I think you could also say that moment in time for me was a thin place where it felt like God broke in. The divine was so present to me that any sort of separation was gone. The veil was lifted, So I have found that those thin places in my life, whether it's a religious experience or it's, again, an actual physical place, have served as almost mountaintop moments of transformation, moments of feeling, I would say, less lonely in this world, a reminder that God is with us. In my, Christian language, my parishioners know I tell them to look for signs, to be open to how God speaks, because it's not always a thunderous voice from on high, right? Sometimes it is, you are in a place and you all of a sudden feel connected. You feel awe, right? Connected to something larger than yourself, connected to divine mystery, the wild holy, if you will, right? So that moment in time. And sometimes I think, again, it's a space, and it's also could be a place, if that makes sense.
So, so you've had, I mean, I don't think this is unusual. You've had these thin spaces slash places in your life where the veil has lifted, or 3 feet, three, there's 3 feet between heaven and earth, And I'm wondering, Lauren, how, my perception sometimes is that those experiences can be almost like reference points that we can go back to if we remember. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of people have experiences that are profound mountaintop experiences, either literally or figuratively. And they're often they can happen in a split second, but they can impact the rest of your life. So I wanted to, and obviously the call experience that you shared was really similar to what I'm describing. I also had a call experience that was similar. So it's amazing to kind of to hear that. Wanted to ask about Stonehenge. I don't want us to forget about Stonehenge. So, would you tell us about when you went to Stonehenge, what it was like? What were you expecting? What did you experience?
And do you think it's a thin place?
I do think Stonehenge is a thin place. So, and I also do not think that the aliens built it. I will go on
No.
record now. Okay.
We got it.
Aliens did not build. Check.
I just want to clarify that now. Anyway,
You're on the record, Lauren.
So my best friend and I, who is also a UCC minister, we had talked for years about going to Oxford, England. So she is a big C.S. Lewis fan, and I am a big J.R.R. Tolkien fan. And we were like, we have to go to Oxford because they met at Oxford, and it would be this awesome, epic best friend trip. So we finally made it happen. We've been talking about this for literally a decade. We finally made it happen.
Nerdy friends are the best. This is
Yes.
awesome. I love this.
Yes.
Love this.
Such nerds, like such nerds. So we finally made it happen. And one of the things, when we were planning our trip, I had said to her, I really want to see Stonehenge. And I know she was doing the driving. I don't even know how to drive stick. So she was doing the driving, and I knew it was a big ask for her to drive us to Stonehenge because it's in the middle of nowhere, if you don't know that. So it's in the middle of nowhere. And she was like, yes, I have always wanted to go to Stonehenge too. Let's do it. So off we went on this adventure to Stonehenge. And what was funny is we ended up having an unusually warm, like 8 days in England. I mean, bright, sunny, like the antithesis of English weather, except the day we went to Stonehenge. It was misty and rainy. It was very cool, so it felt very essentially English, like English countryside. And here we are at Stonehenge. And I mean, this is one of the most visited sites, in the United Kingdom, right? I mean, maybe in the world. So there's a lot of people there. Tour buses of people, all sorts of, people from all over the world who are there. So it's not a place where you're going to get your alone time with the Stones. That's not, that's not how this is going to go for you. Right. And we walked around the outside and really just took it in. And I can honestly say we both had moments where we felt like energy pulsing, like we could just feel this calming, but also strong energy. And, to the point we both kind of put our hands on the ground to, for a second, like feel that energy and take it in. And, there's all sorts of theories about what Stonehenge is, why it was built, what it meant. I was fascinated. And this is like the theory that I subscribe to is a number of years ago, they excavated and they found a lot of human remains. And some have wondered if this was recognized as a place of healing, and people brought folks there who were really sick and who maybe did not survive long after the trip. And so there are human remains there, not because there's not really human sacrifice sort of evidence, but there are human remains there. I mean, there was a village nearby. This would have been a place perhaps of worship of some sort. We know that it aligns with the summer solstice. So there's an alignment there of how the sun comes up. I mean, it's really fascinating from an astronomical perspective.
We just passed the summer solstice,
Exactly.
right?
But believe it or not, you can follow Stonehenge on Instagram. Like, I highly recommend it because they post the most amazing pictures of Stonehenge. And of course, they had beautiful pictures of all the people who gathered for the summer solstice. And these are folks who identify as, pagans, modern Celtic Christians, people who are Wiccan, people who are Druids. I mean, you name it, right? There's, or people who just like really see this as a marvel of English heritage and will just want to come for just the architectural marvel of it all. So anyway, we both felt, wow, this is a holy place. This is a thin place. And it was one of those bucket list items that I had wanted to see for so long. And I was so proud of us that we made it happen because we'd been talking about it for so long. But sometimes you see something you've wanted to see for a long time, it ends up being a little bit of a letdown. This exceeded my expectations, partly because, again, of the energy that I felt there. Throughout the UK, there's stone circles, there's the standing stones of Avebury are right up the road, which were equally amazing. So I love stuff like that. I love being out in the world and recognizing and feeling that sense of awe. Again, for me, that connection to God, to the holy, to the divine, well beyond the walls of any human building that gets constructed. I don't think you can go to Notre Dame in Paris and not feel some awe.
I'm thinking of Stonehenge and trying to remember aerial photos that I've seen. And around the outer edge, there's like a earthen, is it a mound or maybe a dip?
It's almost like a ditch. Yep.
Oh, okay, like a
Yep.
ditch.
Yep.
Then inside of that, there's another circle of sand something stones, and then another inner circle of blue stones.
Yep.
So when you were walking around and you were feeling this energetic pulsing, was there a certain spot around there where you felt it most, or was it just the whole area?
It was almost for me, it was emanating outward. And it was when I almost had like the aerial view of the whole thing. Like, I was not super close when I felt, especially like that energy. I was pretty far out, and that's why it almost felt like in waves, like coming outward for me. And that's the other amazing thing is no one can figure out is how in the world did it get there? Because this is not stone that's naturally found right there on Salisbury Plain, right?
So what's your theory? What do you think?
So in the museum, there's a museum you can kind of go in before you head out if you want to. They had all of these hypotheses about if they were able to get it on a ship and then put it on logs and literally roll it. Right? So like a cart of sorts. I mean, that's what makes sense to me. But I might be wrong about this. I think I remember that they had tried to do a simulation to test out this hypothesis and they totally failed. So,
I know. Yeah, like you were saying, it was like 3,000 to 5,000 years ago. I think there were stages of development for Stonehenge. So the moving of the stones is somewhere in there.
Absolutely. And the upper stone, it still is in the circle, but it was once a closed circle at the top, and all of those stones have since fallen down. So it would have been a complete circle on the top and on the bottom with the pillars in the middle. I encourage you, don't watch those aliens made Stonehenge shows. Watch like the History Channel, some of the other the mysteries of Stonehenge shows.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating.
I want to go slightly back to what you're saying before. Your sense of what is holy about it was like the stones were created obviously over a period of time, Then at some point, people began to come, maybe bringing loved ones to be healed. What exactly do you think the source of the energy is actually? Is it the stones themselves? Is it the placement of the stones in relationship to the sky? What is it, the land? And how do you make sense of that for yourself?
My answer is yes.
All of
So
those things.
I think it's all of those things. I have sometimes wondered. So I went to the Holy Land, right? And I've been to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is a very important place for Christians. I had the holiest moment in that sacred place watching the worshipers and their devotion as much as the place itself. So I sometimes wonder, does a place become holy because it's holy in and of itself? It's like that geographical thin place. Or does it become holy because of the energy of the people who journey and make that pilgrimage and are coming for healing, bringing all of their hopes and their expectations and their love for loved ones? And that also makes it holy. Like I see it as a both and. And I think for me, that's where the energy was, the energy of it being a place historically of healing, it being a place of this marvel of we still don't know how in the world this got built and it's 2025. And then all of the families and the friends, like my best friend and I, and the school groups, and I mean all these people who were there to see it. That was holy too. So for me, it's all of the above that made it feel thin.
It reminds me of that Wendell Berry quote that there's just sacred places and desecrated places.
Mm,
In other words, that all geography is sacred,
yeah.
and you can kind of strip the sacred away in a sense, but you start with the sacred.
Yes.
I know that all stones seem to be in alignment with, as we spoke about, the solstices,
Right.
but also um, the the smaller stones could align with a lunar calendar as well. Just to say that maybe a connection also with natural rhythms of the earth or natural rhythms of the universe. Maybe that holds some sort of energetic somethingness as well.
Yeah, and the idea of it being like a calendar, some would say that in and of itself is cycles of life and death and birth and rebirth and the changing of the seasons and the rhythms of life. So, I mean, it makes sense to me that you feel the rhythm of a place in a way energetically, because that's what it also is too. I hesitate to say it's just one thing because I think that's what makes it so beautiful.
And that makes it wild as
Yes.
as we celebrate here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, I think I kind of want to get into this a little bit too, Lauren. I mean, you took a group of us into the wild. You take really stunning nature photographs. I really appreciate those. And in the last couple of years, you've been really invested in forest therapy. You've gotten trained and certified in forest therapy. I just had a really beautiful experience on the nature walk you took. I think of myself sometimes as a little bit more of an indoor cat than an outdoor cat. Especially as I was getting bitten on the walk. But you really helped me open my eyes to see your favorite patch of woods in a new way and in the way that you see it. Can you say more about forest therapy? It's newish, I would say. It seems like it's taking off maybe in the last like 3 or 4 years. So how did you learn about it? What do you like about it? And where do you want to go with it?
So I stumbled upon forest therapy during COVID. So I was serving my church, and obviously we were staying home and staying safe, being apart from each other for months on end. And all I can say is the extroverts among us were not okay during that time. And I was having a really hard time, quite literally preaching to a screen, not being able to interact with my people on Sunday mornings, being able to see them at meetings. I all at the same time while putting on a brave, hopeful face for them, because I did not want them to know that I was struggling so much. I just didn't want to add to their burdens. So my boyfriend at the time, now my husband, is a big fisherman. And we got into this pattern of he would come pick me up and we would go to some of his favorite fishing spots all over Eastern Connecticut. And it was a safe thing to do because we were in the same pod together. So we weren't interacting with anybody else and we were outside, but it was a way to frankly get out of the house. He has beautiful spots where he goes fishing, secret spots. I won't say them on the podcast, but anyway, he has beautiful spots where he goes fishing. And it started with him teaching me to fish. And I have to say that it became really not my thing. So I would be supportive as he fished, but mostly I allowed myself to go back to the childhood days of hanging out in that oak tree. I would let myself be really calm, relaxed, very present, listen to the birds, watch the water, look at specific trees on the banks of these mostly rivers, occasionally lakes, and just be. And it really started helping me get out of my funk that I was in at the time. And I remember after a trip that we took, I went home and I Googled forest meditation because I was interested if I could discover and find a specific meditation I could download on my phone and have with me in the forest. And I stumbled upon Shinrin-yoku, which is forest bathing. And I thought, what in the world is this? And I downloaded it. I downloaded this book on my Kindle that day. And I got to learn what this is. And I thought, this is really interesting. I tore through this book and was like, this is awesome. So then I had the steps to actually forest bathe and just started doing that as a spiritual practice for myself. Again, just to feel a little bit more grounded and rooted at that time when everything seemed so chaotic. The more I delved into it, discovered, my gosh, you can learn how to do this with other people. There are people who teach this. You can even get certified and offer this to other people. This would be awesome to be able to offer as part of my ministry, not just for me, but be able to take people out to discover this beautiful practice for themselves. So it really happened out of feeling unrooted, right, during the pandemic and finding a solution that worked for me. I'm a pretty restless person by nature, and forest therapy is this one spiritual practice that felt like a perfect fit from the moment I discovered it, because it's a little bit movement based, which I need. It's very hard for me to sit still, and sometimes to sit in a room. It's just hard for me to do that.
Yeah.
Whereas walking quietly, contemplatively on a path in the forest, noticing things has felt very natural for me.
So I want to get clear on what exactly forest therapy is because, you've said forest bathing, and that sounds like you go out and just like bathe in nature. Whereas therapy sounds like you're letting the trees like do therapy on you. But is there meditative practices you do out there? Because I missed your forest walk when you guys went.
We'll go on another.
Yeah, that would be really great. I really want to. So, like, what exactly does that entail to participate in one of your forest walks?
So the terms are often used interchangeably. If you want to nuance it, forest therapy is taking a forest bath with a guide. So you can compare it to doing yoga. You can absolutely get out your yoga mat, do yoga by yourself. If moves, you don't need a teacher to lead you through that. But sometimes it's helpful to have someone teaching you, right? Showing you how to do the practice. So a forest therapy walk is with someone who is guiding you. I start with welcoming the group to the land, and in some ways the land to the group, to orient us to this particular place. I have a favorite place where I like guiding here in Colchester. So it's a spot of the forest that I know very well because I've spent hours and hours there myself. And we do what's called a sensory awareness meditation that really helps tap into your senses, what you're hearing, what you're seeing, smelling, touching, even your heart sense, what is striking you in your heart before we walk. And most walks are usually not much longer than a mile. This isn't a hike up a mountain. It's very flat for the most part, kind of calm.
Gentle.
Gentle, exactly. So there is movement, but you can also adapt it so that you don't go very far at all, depending on people's physical realities. So it can be kind of a loop, or it could be even just staying in the front part of this park. As we walk, I offer invitations, and I always have said, just because I invite you to this doesn't mean you have to RSVP. Yes, I can invite you to pay attention in this particular place to what you're hearing, but you might look off into the distance and see a really cool fern, and the sunlight is hitting this fern in a way that you're like, I got to check out that fern. Cool, right? Go. The invitations are based on your senses. I have kind of designed a walk with this land in places that I think are cool along the trail and lend themselves to deeper thinking. And then we end with tea. So this practice came out of Japan, and it ends with not a full-on tea ceremony, but I have a teapot and teacups, and we have tea in the forest and spend that time together and thank the land for all that we encounter with each other and the ways that we connect with the divine through the land. Some would argue we evolved with trees as humans. So trees have what's called phytoncides. So they have aromatic compounds that are being admitted into the air. And when we breathe them in, that is partly what helps lower our our blood pressure, our heart rates sometimes. You know, if you ever have smelled pine or cedar and it's that sort of woodsy, lovely smell, those are phytoncides. So it's actually the tree's defense immune system, but it interacts with our immune system to help us. So when we interact with trees, it's this beautiful relationship. So do the trees heal us in some ways? Yes, they do. Like the trees help heal our planet, help cool our planet down. So there's a lovely interaction there.
I like how you were saying that you will guide people as to what to pay attention to, but if they feel called somewhere else, then they're free to go explore that fern with sunlight. Um,
Absolutely.
and so do you, I just find that the holy wild, the holy will speak to each person individually. Have you really noticed that as you go out? Does the forest give opportunity perhaps in different or maybe more ways than worship in your church for people to encounter the sacred in their own unique way? I'm wondering your experience of that.
Yeah, I think in some ways, the experience in the forest can sometimes feel more individual. Like again, so I am being called to the sunlight on this fern, and it's really speaking to my heart. And so I have the ability to kind of go off there and be in that space and experience that, versus sometimes in church spaces it's more, I mean, it's a communal service. It's we're here together in community, and at the same time people can be having in their individual experiences. They may not wander down the pews in that moment to see something, but
Yeah.
inside they might be making that journey of something, you know, the sermon is striking them in a particular way, and they're daydreaming or thinking about how that connects to their story. I have
Mhm.
often said, I love nothing more than after I'm a solo pastor, I preach every single Sunday. So my people hear me all the time, right? All the time. And I love when people come up to me after worship and relate something I shared to their story. Like that's what I want, is something that, whether it's in the life of Jesus or in my own life, that it all of a sudden is making a connection for you. So I think that's like the beautiful thing about both practices, right? Communal worship or even, a forest therapy walk is it's the both and, right?
Yeah.
Of individual and group. And I should say that after each invitation, we kind of pause and bring everyone back together. And then I open it up for sharing. So before we move on to the next invitation, people have the opportunity to share the cool experience they just had, or to say, gosh, I never noticed this. I occasionally have had folks get emotional out in the forest because the walk, it might be the same path, the same forest, but in some ways we change. And I would argue the forest is never exactly the same. I mean, this is a trail that I walk constantly and I notice new things all the time. I was out last week and I was walking and I was by myself and I noticed this beautiful azalea bush. And again, it was the way the sunlight was filtering in at that moment. The pink was almost blazing. So I went off the trail just to see this bush on a closer level because I was like, how have I never noticed this before? And I'm there constantly. Like, I mean, I'm there all the time, but like the
Yeah.
truth is, it was the way the light hit at that particular time of day that I all of a sudden noticed this that I had never seen before. And then I got a tick on me and it was a whole thing.
Yeah.
That's why you
The
check yourselves,
downsides.
my friends, in Connecticut. Check yourself for ticks before you get home and as you get home. But anyway,
Yeah.
that's what I get for tromping over into the forest. But it was worth it because
Totally.
it was really striking in that moment.
That's the beauty of the seasons, like, because,
Yes.
wherever you are changes on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, seasonal basis. So it is always different. Just going back to, the comparison between the communal worship service at the church versus like a forest therapy walk with you. I think that that's really neat that both instances will incorporate a communal aspect and an individual aspect.
Right.
But one will have a focus on individual approach, and the other one will have more community. And I think that that's so great. It just speaks to the importance of having a multiplicity of spiritual practices
Yes.
that will work for your personality, your time of life, your mood at the moment, and your needs at the moment. It's really important to have, different approaches.
And like I said, I'm an ordained minister. I've been in ministry, going into my 15th year now. I just discovered this spiritual practice a few years ago. So I hope this is an invitation that there's always new things to discover. And there might be something that really touches your heart that you don't even know what it is right now. And it will all of a sudden break through, right? That you can discover something that can help you in highs and lows of your life.
Lauren, this has been such a rich conversation. I'm just saturated. I'm thinking about the forest walk that we took and lingering in a copse of trees and smelling what this bush smelled like and noticing um, the babbling brook, even the mosquitoes was really was part of our community. Like speaking of community, it's such a gift. I think that that message of being open to the spiritual practices to come paying attention, like paying deep attention to the world around us and to our own spirits and hearts in some challenging times that really feels relevant today. And it's been such a gift to hear how you encounter the wild holy in the forest, in ancient sacred places like Stonehenge and the oak tree, that I hope folks are taken care of back in Ohio and in your community where you are rooted right now.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. This is great. I love the thread of the thin places. Before we wrap things up, we wanted to give you some space to share what's going on with you. If you have a place where people can find you online or get in touch with you if they want to, or maybe take a forest walk with you at some point.
Yeah, so you can find me online at Lauren Ostrout ostrout.com. And I, on my blog, have sermons and weekly reflections that I write for my congregation, but I also share some of my photography. I do love nature photography and information about forest therapy, and just it's my little space of love and light on the internet. So you can always find me there.
That is so lovely. Thank you, Lauren. We need more love and light for sure. So, so we will include all of the links that you mentioned in the show notes so listeners can easily find Lauren and follow along.
And for those of you who want to stay connected with the Wild Holy, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at The Wild Holy or subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app.
If this conversation has stirred something in you or helped you feel a little bit more at home in the wild and the sacred and the wildness of these times, we would love it if you would subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone else who is walking the path.
And lastly, before we wrap up the episode, I wanted to leave you with a moment of reflection. I want you to think back, listener. Have you ever encountered a thin place yourself? A moment when the ordinary and the sacred seemed to touch? So here are 3 questions to leave you with as you explore where that experience might have been. When have you felt most deeply connected to yourself, to others, to nature, or something greater than yourself? Where or when have you experienced a stillness or clarity that felt beyond ordinary explanation? And finally, is there a memory, place, or experience that you return to mentally, emotionally, or physically when you need grounding, inspiration, or a reminder of what really matters? So if you feel comfortable, share your own thin place experience in the comments. And until next week, may you notice your own thin places where the wild holy is waiting to be encountered.